Okay, I just wanted to take a couple minutes here and go through this snowplow snow equipment install form here and show you guys what it looks both on the front end and back end and how everything works to make it do what it does on the front end. So first field here is pretty simple. It's just a radio group. You just select whichever equipment specialist you are that's going to be filling out the form, or other if you're someone else, to be determined to install. If this is yes, nothing pops up, but if it is no, it pops up with date of install and time of install. And I'll just show you real quick how that works in the back end. The radio group for the equipment specialist is pretty simple. You just drag this radio group icon here over and fill out your fields that you want. To be determined install, how we get the date of install and time of install to show up when one of these, whenever the no option is selected. You go and you hit edit on the field, and this is just a this field right here is a date field, so you would drag and drop that over. You hit that. You can say, is it visible? And sometimes there are some specific instances where you wouldn't want it visible. Not very many though. Is required. This basically means if you check that box, the person filling out the form cannot submit the form without filling it out. Map to action description and title, we'll come back to that. How we get it to show up when the no option is selected in to be determined install field is this right here, visible if, and then you select the field you want to have this specific set of logic work off of. To be determined install equals, and you can change it to, if you have a radio group that is more than two options, you can do any of, and we did that later on down in the bottom section of the form here, so I will go over that when we get to that. As you can see here, it says it's visible if, is this to be determined install, answer is no. And that's whenever this will pop up on the front end here. So we'll go ahead and select a due date, and this time of install is the same. It's just a radio group with the same logic applied as the date field had. Is this a to be determined install equals no, then it will show up. Type of install. This is another radio group that we have logic applied to below fields on. As you can see here in the front end, we don't have anything selected right now, so there are no fields populated related to plows or spreaders. Now if we click plow only, then you can see plow brand, light style, model name, model and serial numbers, fields all populate. If we click spreader only, you can see the plow, oh, that was an oversight. Plow light style needs to not show up. So this right here will go in, logic, visible if, type of install is any of plow only or plow and spreader, because we do not need this showing up all the time. I wonder if that would have to reload the pages. Anyway, and then plow and spreader selection, you get well, back to spreader only, which is where I was. You can see spreader brand, model name and numbers shows up, and then the truck bed type shows up as well. Since it'll be installed, we need to know what type of bed it is, and if we're gonna have to do any custom welding or anything like that to fit the spreader in. And then plow and spreader, basically all that does is, okay, now it shows everything from both spreader and plow information. And you just saw me go in and edit that right there, the plow light style, and that's exactly what we did for all of the other fields. Logic, went to the type of install field, which is this one right here. We said if it's any of plow only or plow and spreader selection, then these plow specific fields will show up. On the spreader information, it's the same logic, but type of install any of plow and spreader or spreader only. So this selection does not show up whenever it is a plow only. For obvious reasons, we don't need to know spreader information if there is no spreader. That's about it for this, for conditional things showing up. Gabe testing, we'll just go ahead and fill out a plow only real quick. Snow dog, and see here, plow light style isn't a required field. So that means that it does not have this selection right here enabled in the back end. Go with LEDs, X90, what vehicle is this being installed on? This right here is just a drop down like this right here. You get it and you drag it over, and then we've just gone in and we've added, oh, if it will let me click it, oh, there we go. We've added all the year options, so you can scroll down and find the right year. Say it's a 2011, and you can see another drop down here. But this one has an other field. This one might also, but I'm not 100% sure. This one does not have an other field, the year, because presumably we wouldn't be installing a plow on or spreader on anything older than a 1984. But the make does have an other. So if it was like say like a Mitsubishi, you could type that in. I actually don't know any Mitsubishi cars that you would want to put a spreader on, so we're just gonna go with a Ford F-250 gas, and we're gonna go ahead and submit this, and we'll look at how the details that we filled out populated in this action. So you can see it tells us the date that we selected up here and the time that the install is scheduled for. Customer name, plow model, and then the truck information, and then everything else shows up in the description. So the way to organize this this form populating in the action is to use number 1, order from top to bottom of the form. If there are details mapped to the action description or title and they're at the top of the form, they will populate first. So you can see equipment specialist here was the very first field required, so it populated at the very top of the description. And obviously we didn't need Plow brand populating at all, because everyone knows if it's an EX90 it's going to be a snow dog, so it is not mapped to either the description or the title. So it is solely a selection on the form and does not get used in the action at all. But here, plow model name, we kind of want to know that at a quick glance for the, if it's a assembly, if it needs assembled for certain, we would need to have that information at a quick glance. So it is mapped only to the action title, because if it's in the action title we don't really need it in the description, so we do not have it mapped to the action description. I think the only field that we have mapped to multiple, both the action description and title, are the date and time of the install, which isn't 100% necessary, but it's good to just have it in there no matter where you're looking at it. And now we will go out of here. Oh, actually, because this first bit here is part of it, I'll show you why these sub actions show up. Is because we have right here, each time a form is submitted, it will be added to the selected project, which is snowplow installs, and it will be assigned to JC, Josh, and Stephanie. And you can see those assignees here, JC, Josh, and Stephanie. And it will use the action template, snowplow install, select new or use display button. And all this action template does is it puts in these sub actions for the equipment specialist who filled out the form to go ahead and set the due date to the install date, link the action to the whole goods assembly project, which we will go down here. And this way, David and Stephanie do not have to look in multiple places for their tasks. They can just go straight to their one feed and know exactly what needs to be put in there. This action card is essentially mirrored into that project. So we did that. The equipment specialist who filled out the form says this is a new or a used unit or a new unit that is on display, so it does not need assembled. We're going to say this is a new whole good and it does need assembled. So when we click that button, I will actually go here into not sure, it looks like it might have been broken. I know that Josh and Stephanie were working some stuff out with the linking. There was a little bit of a hiccup there. We'll go in and we'll just look at it though, because that button should have added the label unit to build and moved the status, but we'll just look right here. Update status. See this, whenever you edit a status name in the project, then it messes with automations. So see, that should have been moved to unit to build. You can see here it did have the add label unit to build, and it applies the action template, snowplow install, select install type, and that basically just prompts the equipment specialist here to select the next button. I'm going to go ahead and manually move this to unit to build so those other buttons disappear. You can see over here, new whole good needs assembled button and used/display whole good button only show up if the status is of the action card is unstarted. And the reason that we do that is because the forms automatically will always output to the unstarted status, so those buttons will always be there whenever you first go and look at the action card. You can see here a difference between the use display whole good button and the new whole goods needs assembled is number one, this label here, unit to build, does not get applied to used/display whole good. The reason for that is if it's a use/display whole good, we do not need to have these buttons here, plow only, spreader only, and plow and spreader buttons show up, because those apply an action template for the whole good assembly team. So minimize those two, and then we'll look at plow only, spreader only, and plow and spreader buttons. Just real quick, go ahead and complete that subtask since we've done that already. And you can see here all of these buttons have three things in common. When they're clicked, they will add the label being built, and when they're clicked, they will remove the label unit to build, and these buttons will only show up if the label is unit to build, which is our current label here, and that's why they're showing up. So you can see here they're adding the label being built, removing the label unit to build, only show up if the label is unit to build, and the same down here for plow and spreader. The difference between these all is they all have their own separate action template that populates whenever they're clicked. The snowplow install, plow only, spreader only, and plow and spreader, and that will add specific subtasks assigned to certain people for the assembly of the whole good. So we'll go ahead and we will click, this was a plow only, so we'll click the plow only. You can see here all of the subtasks that were in that action template show up. We've done that. We've selected the install type button, and we'll assume at this point that parts has the parts necessary for the install, staged and labeled, and they would upload a photo in the comments here using this right here. So we'll go ahead and mark that complete. And real quick, I want to explain, because you can see none of these buttons update the status. They don't move the status at all. And that is why we have to use the labels in order to have those buttons show up and disappear whenever they've already been clicked. Because if we were to have these buttons show up just whenever the status is moved from the first button, you can see in this first two buttons here, it'll update the status to unit to build. And the reason we can't use that status here, the use display whole good moves it to awaiting install, since it skips the assembly process. The reason we can't use that status is because whenever we click the next button, the type of install here, these three, plow only, spreader only, and plow and spreader, the status does not get updated. So if we were to have these based off of the status, they would all still show up, and someone could still go in and click the button again and have a bunch of duplicate sub actions show up because we applied that action template from another button again. And you can see here, built awaiting install button has shown up, and the reason for that is because all of these, plow only, spreader only, and plow and spreader, apply the label or add the label being built, and this button's condition to show is if the label is being built. So we'll assume that the whole goods assembly team has done all of their steps, and they've even gone ahead and delivered the unit dyno service already. So they are going to go down and click this button here. So you can see the status has been moved to awaiting install. We've removed the label being built so that the built awaiting install button does not show anymore. And we've applied the action template, snowplow install whole good delivered to service. So all these new sub actions show up, and we can go through this process assuming that the service department has done their parts. Finance and equipment specialists have done their parts. The ticket has been checked out, and now one last button here you can see is completed. And all this does, since there are no other buttons that show up whenever we click it, we can go ahead and use the status of awaiting install to be the condition for this button showing up. And all this does whenever you click it is it updates the status to completed, and you can see it completed any other sub actions that weren't already and marked the main action complete, moved the status to completed. And obviously everyone is going to have their own unique applications for automations, and they're going to want their buttons to do different things, and it's all going to depend on what statuses they have and what processes they need to recreate. But that is a basic overview of how our process works. There are still some little things that need to be worked out, but overall a pretty functional system. And yeah, that's it.